The airplane door closed with a heavy metallic click, the kind that echoed inside the cabin and reminded everyone on board that there was no turning back now. Passengers shuffled into their seats, stowing bags, fastening belts, adjusting armrests, and pulling out their phones for one last message before takeoff. The crew moved with rehearsed precision, smiles on their faces, but in the quiet hum of the engines, there was the unshakable awareness of anticipation in the air. In seat 13F, by the window, sat a woman who seemed like any other traveler. She was dressed simply, jeans, a light jacket, her hair tied back with little care for style. To most, she looked ordinary, maybe even invisible. But beneath her calm expression lay a story that would soon ripple through the very skies she once commanded. The passengers around her saw just a quiet woman on a journey. What they didn't see was the shadow of wars fought, lives saved, and skies once claimed under a name that no pilot could forget. Before we dive deeper into this powerful journey of courage, redemption, and an identity that could never be erased, let me pause here. If you believe in kindness, in the strength of second chances, and in the stories that remind us of the unspoken heroes among us, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Legends of History. Your support keeps stories like this alive and brings forgotten voices back into the light. The aircraft began to roll, its wheels humming along the tarmac. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the horizon in strokes of orange and gold, a reminder that the world above was waiting. As the jet lifted from the ground, so did the curtain on a past that refused to stay hidden. Her name, at least the one known among pilots, was not the one printed on her boarding pass. To strangers, she was just another passenger. But in the skies, years before this quiet flight, she was Valkyrie. A call sign whispered with awe, respect, and fear in equal measure. The name alone carried weight, for it belonged to a woman who had once flown not as a passenger, but as the spear of thunder itself. Back then, she had been among the few, an F-22 pilot who carved her name into history through missions so daring they felt almost impossible. She had flown into hostile zones where radar screens lit up with threats like a deadly constellation. She had felt the crushing silence of radio calls that never came back after a wingman was lost. She had watched the horizon blur with fire and fury, yet still pushed forward, not for glory, but for those who depended on her. Every time her call sign crackled through the comms, a wave of reassurance spread across Allied fighters. Valkyrie was there. But war does not leave anyone untouched. When the missions ended, and medals were pinned, the weight of what was lost remained heavier than what was gained. She had left the service quietly, not because she was weak, but because she was human. There were nights she woke up in a sweat, hearing the roar of engines and the crack of missiles in her dreams. There were days when silence was unbearable, and others when it was all she could cling to. Now, years later, she was just a passenger. Or so she thought. Hours into the flight, as the passengers settled into movies and conversations, a ripple of unease moved through the cabin. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but edged with tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing a short delay in our course. Airspace clearance is being coordinated." The words were careful, too careful. Then, out of the window, 13F saw them, two sleek silhouettes slicing through the clouds, close enough that their presence could not be mistaken. F-22 Raptors. Her heart skipped, not because of fear, but because the sight was like seeing old comrades across a battlefield long after the war had ended. The passengers murmured, pointing out the windows, marveling at the fighters escorting their commercial jet. What no one else knew was that the fighters weren't just routine escorts. On their comms, in encrypted channels passengers would never hear, voices carried uncertainty. Something in their radar scans, something in their clearance orders had triggered caution. And in the middle of it, as their leader prepared to identify the civilian flight, a call sign came through. It was whispered, almost unbelievingly, "Valkyrie." The F-22 pilots, hardened and sharp, had just heard the name of a ghost. A call sign they had read about in briefings, heard in mess halls, or even looked up to as rookies. Some had once trained under her command, their own careers shaped by her missions. And now, impossibly, she was sitting in seat 13F, on a commercial jet, her presence shaking the skybound guardians who thought she had vanished forever. Inside the cabin, she closed her eyes, the memories flooding back. She hadn't expected this moment, this collision of past and present. She felt the same mixture of pride and pain she had lived with for years. She had left the cockpit, but the skies had not left her. And in the silent recognition between the fighter pilots outside and the woman inside, something shifted. The flight continued, uneventful to the rest of the passengers. But for those who knew the call sign, the air was electric with unspoken honor. The Raptors held formation, not out of protocol, but out of respect. And in that moment, Valkyrie realized that though she had left the war, the legacy of courage she carried could never be erased. By the time the jet landed, the ordinary passengers only remembered the cool sight of fighter jets alongside their plane. But for the F-22 pilots, it was a day they would never forget. And for the woman in 13F, it was a reminder that even when you believe your story has ended, sometimes the skies themselves whisper your name again. So if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that heroes walk quietly among us, carrying both their scars and their strength, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Legends of History. It's through your support that we can continue sharing stories of courage, resilience, and humanity that deserve to be remembered. Special request. Tell us in the comments, if you could choose your own call sign, what would it be?